If you've not yet already, can you please take a minute today and fill out our annual listener survey found at mjtodaymedia.com/survey. It takes just a minute, and the sooner we get enough responses, the sooner I can stop bugging you about it. So thanks so much. This episode of Marijuana Today Daily is brought to you by MJ Today Media, publishers of this podcast, our weekly show Marijuana Today, as well as the weekly titles Green Rush and Weed Wonks. We've been making podcasts about legal cannabis since 2014, and we have the audience to show for it, with tens of thousands of listeners tuning into our shows. Get started on making the smartest business decision you'll make by becoming a sponsor by emailing our business developer Michael at mjtodaymedia.com. That's Michael at mjtodaymedia.com. Good morning, Marijuana Nation. It's Tuesday, September 22nd, 2020, and you're tuned in to episode 983 of Marijuana Today Daily. I'm your host, Shay Gunther, and I'll be walking you through today's marijuana news and headlines. As always, we have a full and busy day of cannabis news in our hands, so let's jump right into it. We have a good bit of news to start off the news week with a proposed bill in the U.S. House of Representatives that would extend the 2014 pilot program that the industrial hemp industry is currently operating under. Industrial hemp was made fully legal at the federal level in the 2018 Farm Bill, but the regulations under which it's currently regulated are from a pilot program first set up in 2014. The good news here is that this bill, if signed into law, would stave off the introduction of a set of interim rules for hemp developed by the USDA that has faced a lot of criticism from industry stakeholders, especially in recent weeks. This is particularly important as the current program under which hemp is regulated is due to expire at the end of next month. Kyle's story on this is a good one and worthy of a full dive in. As always, we have all the news we cover linked to on our website at mjtodaydaily.com. Ben Adlin, also writing over at Marijuana Moment, keeps the good news hemp train rolling with a pickup of a headline out of Texas where a judge recently ruled in a case involving a ban on smokable hemp that was enacted by the state, seemingly counter to the Texas Constitution. A group of 4 industrial hemp companies sued Texas last month over the ban, and the case has been tied up in various courts ever since. Late last week, Travis County Judge Laura Livingston issued a ruling that found that the 4 companies, quote, have demonstrated a probable right to relief, unquote, and granted them a temporary injunction on the enforcement of the statewide ban on smokable hemp. This is not the last we'll hear of this storyline for sure, but it is the second time that Judge Livingston has ruled in favor of the hemp companies, so hopefully any updates here will be good ones. Our final top story in the day is another story that lands on the happier side of the spectrum, with Vermont Governor Phil Scott saying on Friday that he was happy enough with Senate Bill 54, which would set up a taxed and regulated sales program in the state, which passed everything but legal cannabis sales via the legislative process in 2018. State lawmakers have been working this year to hammer out Senate Bill 54 in answer to that problem, and most recently merged 2 versions of the legislation in a bicameral conference committee. That new merged bill has been approved by the Vermont House, passing last week via a vote of 92 to 56, and will stand a full Senate vote this week. And if Governor Scott's comments on Friday stand, we should see it signed into law. This is notable as Governor Scott signaled earlier this year that he needed to see a large set of changes made before he'd consider making the legislation law. Another good one you can read about in full if you have Vermont on your radar. Those are the top stories for today. It's time for Marijuana Today Daily Headlines Blitz. Before we blitz it in headlines, let's quickly thank our sponsor, MJ Today Media, publishers of this podcast, our weekly show Marijuana Today, as well as our weekly titles Green Rush and Weed Wonks, which you can find at mjtodaypodcast.com, greenrushpodcast.net, and weedwonks.com. We reach the largest audience of podcast listeners interested in the business and politics of legal cannabis by a very large factor and can put your cannabis brand, service, business, or product in front of them. Our listeners make decisions, and most importantly, they take action when we talk about our sponsors. Tap into that marketing magic yourself today by emailing our business developer Michael at mjtodaymedia.com. That's Michael at mjtodaymedia.com. All right, time for the Blitz. Ben Adlin has another headline on the day, this time with a look at a new program being put in place in New York State that will allow people to petition to have their past marijuana-related criminal records physically destroyed. The state automatically purged 150,000 or so cannabis convictions automatically last year, but that process simply bars the public from viewing the records. As Ben has it, those records are still accessible via things like gun permit and background checks for jobs in law enforcement. The paperwork involved to get the paperwork physically destroyed in New York State runs just one page and can be found linked to via Ben's story. Green Market Report dips into the rise of marijuana-themed monthly gift boxes, with some brands reporting increases in business through the pandemic north of 500%. It would make sense that in a world where more of us are spending more time at home, services that send you fun cannabis products would be a bigger hit. But as always, it's nice to have the numbers to put to the intuition. If you're following this small slice of the industry, give this one a read. Statistics Canada just released some new numbers for legal cannabis sales in the month of July, up in that legal nation with $231 million Canadian, or around 175 million US, in legal marijuana sales made, up 15% from the previous month and 115% from the same month last year. Pop over to New Cannabis Ventures for a provincial breakdown on how July and the previous 4 months held for legal cannabis. Activists in Nebraska just turned in more than 15,000 signatures of support for a petition to form a new political party called Legal Marijuana Now. That is good news for party leader Mark Elworth Jr., as they needed just 6,800 to be certified. The new Legal Marijuana Now party is a little late to the party this year, if you'll excuse that bad joke, but we'll have full access to the ballots in Nebraska moving ahead, just the same as any other certified party. Congratulations to Mr. Elworth and everyone else involved in this for the big effort. The Los Angeles Times has an interesting story about marijuana branding and cultural appropriation that I think is worthy of a read. The story looks at the California cannabis brand La Chingona, which is centered around the story of 3 sisters growing up in Mexico who worked together to start their cannabis company, each taking lessons from their upbringing on their family's sugarcane fields. The only problem with this textbook marketing story is that it's entirely made up, crafted wholesale by the company's owner, a white guy named Michael Kaiser, who said that he was inspired to create his characters based on his Mexican grandmother. This is a super complicated issue in general, which I thought important to put on your news plate today. Give this one a read and give this one some thought. Green Market Report takes us out on the day with a look at a new report from data analytics company Headset, looking at the cannabis consumption habits of millennials, with a gender-based split over cannabis flower, as males prefer to smoke while females consume more vaporizers. This is another good story to read in full, especially if your job involves selling products to young people. Those are the headlines and news for the day. I'll be back with you again on Thursday with another information-packed episode of Marijuana Today Daily. But in the meantime, if you have any stories to share or feedback to give, zip us an email to headlines@mjtodaydaily.com. And while you're clicking around the interwebs, swing over to our website at mjtodaydaily.com to find links to all the news we cover. Thanks to our sponsor, MJ Today Media, and to all of our awesome patron listeners for the support that makes this show possible. To join the illustrious ranks of the patron listeners yourself, swing over to our website at mjtodaydaily.com and click on that big blue button at the top of the page that says, Become a Patron. I'm your host, Shay Gunther. Thanks for tuning in and starting your day with marijuana today. Today.
One take, Shay. One take.